I struggled to cut and sew collars for years until I discovered this perfect technique that you can use to cut and sew your collar that will give you the perfect result. So now you're going to take the neck this way like this. Then you're going to place your tape at the edge here. You're leaving about a 1/4 inch allowance on this part. When you're fixing the collar, it's going to take away this 1/4 inch allowance. So you need to leave out this extra allowance that you use in fixing the collar for you to get the accurate measurement of the neck. Then you're going to take the neck round of the shirt. So I'm going to go around this way like this. When you're taking this measurement, there's no need for you to pull the neck when you're taking it. Just gently take your tape round the neck, following the curve of the neck with your tape. So what we have here now is exactly 20 inches. Another thing you need to do now is to take this part of the placket, you are aligning and merge it together. I want to get the midpoint of the neck at the back. So now you bend it this way like this, aligning the back this way. Then once you align it, we're going to notch a bit of the fabric here like this to mark the midpoint of the neck at the back. The first thing you need to do now is you fold the interfacing into two, just like this. Fold it into two like this. So now after drawing our straight line, I'm going to place the measurement for the collar. Now we're working with a collar of 20 inches. So now since we folded this part into two this way like this, we're going to divide that 20 inches by 2. So 20 inches divided by 2, that will give us 10 inches. So we're going to place our tape from this folded part here. Then we're going to measure 10 inches and mark the 10 inches here this way like this. So I'm going to mark it here like this. From this folded part, I'm going to come up by a 1/2 inch, that's 0.5 inch, then place my marking here. Now we're going to get the midpoint from this point to this folded part. So we measure 10 inches here. So that 10 inches divided by 2, that will give us 5 inches. So now I'm going to place my tape and mark out 5 inches from the folded part here. I'm going to mark out 5 inches here. So from this midpoint, I'm going to come back by 1 inch. So I'm going to take my tape and place it this way, then come back by 1 inch. I'm going to connect this 1/2 inch that I took up, connect it to this marking here that I did. So first off, I'm going to come out straight by about 1 inch. Then from here, you will now connect it in a slanted curve to this position here. So I'm going to take my line and slant it, curve it downward till I get to this position here. We're going to mark out the height of our collar stand. Now the average collar stand is 1 inch. That is the average size. And I'm going to mark my 1 inch, mark it here this way like this, then connect this position here like this. So from this folded part here, I'm still going to come up by 1 inch, mark it this way. Now I'm going to connect this position and connect it to this position here like this. So now how you do that now is you come here in a straight line. Then from this position, this side is slanted. You're going to slant it down slightly, then curve it and connect it to this marking here. So from this position, I'm going to go curving it down slightly. Now I'm placing my mark, then I'm going to connect it to this position here. So now on this position here, you have to give it a curve. Now the reason why you are giving it a curve is because the shape of the neck where you are fixing the collar is slanted. So if you just leave it this way and you fix the collar on that neckline, this position is going to be bent on the collar area. So now you need to curve here in a slanted way and connect it to this position here. So to make it easy for you, from this triangle here, this angle here, you're going to come out by 1/2 inch. So I'm going to place my tape here, mark here, come out by 1/2 inch. So from this position here down here, you're going to come out by 1 inch, slant my line, connect it to this position here down. Then from here, I'm going to connect it in a slanted way to this position. Now the collar height differs from person to person, but for me personally, I prefer the height of my collar to be about 3 inches. So from this position, you're going to come back by 1.5 inch. So it's from this position that we're going to place the height of our collar. I'm going to place the height of my collar, which is 3 inches as the height of my collar. So I'm going to place my ruler and I'm going to draw a straight line and connect the marking I did for the height of my collar this way like this. Now I can actually cut my collar straight this way. Is also a style of collar, but I like my collar to come out and give a little slant. So from this position, you're going to go out by 1/4 inch. Then in a slanted line, you're going to connect this marking and connect it to this position here to give it a slight outward slant. Connect it this way like this, as you can see. So now on this folded part, I'm going to come up by 1.5 inch. Place my 1.5 inch here. Now from this position So about 2 inches in, you're going to go straight. Then from this position, you're going to give a slight upward curve and connect it to this height of the collar here. I'm going to start placing my curve, just a slight outward curve, and connect it to this height of the collar on this part here. So I'm going to cut both of them separately. So I'm going to cut it this way, following the curve that I made. I'm going to cut it this way, curve it like this, then connect it way and cut it this way like this. So from here, I'm going to divide it from the midpoint here like this. So from this position, I'm going to curve out this curve that I made here like this. I'm going to curve it out with my scissors this way like this and connect it to this position. Then I'm going to connect it to this other part that I cut here, making sure that it is aligned. So you can see, connect it to this position here like this. Then I'm going to take my scissors and cut out the collar, connect it this way like this and cut it out like this. I'm going to cut it. You have to be careful to make sure that you're cutting it and it's aligned this way like this. So this is the collar and this is the collar stand. So now I'm going to show you how to press this interfacing on the fabric. Then I'll show you how to fix the collar on the neckline of the shirt. I'm going to take the interfacing and I'm going to place it on the fabric this way. Then you press the interfacing on the fabric this way. So now I'm going to leave 1/2 inch allowance at the lower part of the collar stand here. Curve it this way, like this. Then on both sides of the collar stand, I'm going to still leave 1/4 inch allowance. Curve it this way like this, leaving about a 1/4 inch allowance at the upper part of the collar stand this way like this. Now on the collar, all the parts, I'm going to leave half inch allowance on the collar. I'm going to cut it this way like this, all around the collar. Now I'm going to cut out the facings for the collar and the collar stand. I'm going to cut off the identical pieces of the collar stand this way like this, as you can see, in the shape of the collar stand. Now this is the fabric where we press the interfacing on the collar, and this is the facing. Now here is the interfaced collar stand, and this is the facing that we're going to use to turn it. Now this 1/2 inch allowance that I left at the lower part of the collar stand, I'm going to press it in like this, just the lower part, following the shape of the interfacing. So let's go to the sewing machine and I'm going to show you how to sew the collar. So the first thing I'm going to do now, I'm going to take the interfaced collar stand, then I'm going to run a stitch at the lower part of the collar stand where we folded it in here like this. I'm going to place the good side on the sewing machine this way. So what I'm doing now is a 1/2 inch stitch. So I'm going to run my stitch and follow it through, catching that fold until I get to this other side. So now I'm going to take my interfaced collar. I'm going to place the right side of the interfaced collar on the right side of the facing. So I'm going to face the right sides together this way. Then I'm going to run a stitch from this side, take it up. Then from this up, I'm going to sew down to this other part, then bring it down. So I'm not going to sew the lower part of the collar. I'm going to place it under the machine. Then I'm going to run my stitch. So you're not stitching exactly at the edge of the interfacing. You're going to leave a little gap so that when you turn the collar, it's going to be well balanced. So I'm going to start my stitch from this part and take it up this way like this till I get to the upper part. So I'm going to bend my collar this way. Then I'm going to continue my stitch, following the curve of the collar this way like this. So that's how you're going to follow the stitch this way like this till I get to this other angle of the collar this way like this. Then I'm going to turn the fabric this way. Now I'm going to continue my stitch down till I get to the end of it. Now if you look closely at our stitch that we made, you notice that I'm not stitching exactly at the edge of the interface part of the collar. So there's a little space. So this is the kind of space you're going to leave when you're stitching your collar and your facing. So I'm going to trim off this excess allowance here like this. I'm going to trim off this tip here. I'll just trim it close to the stitch that we did here. I'm going to trim off some of this excess allowance here like this. Trim off this tip here like this. Even at the upper part, I'm going to trim it off just a little bit, leaving just about a 1/4 inch. So trim off this excess allowance. Then we're going to turn it to the right side. You're going to take your pressing iron and press down the collar so that it will be well balanced. Pull it to the back so that it will be balanced and press it down so that it will be well balanced. So now on this lower part, there is where the interfacing ends here. You know, we left some excess on the fabric. You're going to bend it this way, bend it and press it down so that we'll know the edge where the interfacing stops. This is very important when we're fixing the collar stand to the collar. press it down this way like this. So we're going to go to our sewing machine and I'll show you how to sew the collar stand on the collar. Now these are collar and these are collar stand. I'm going to take the collar, place it this way like this. I'm going to bend the collar this way and align the two parts of the collar. Then I'm going to notch the middle in the collar. This is very important when we're fixing the collar to the collar stand. So I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to notch the midpoint of the collar here like this. Notch it just a little bit like this. I'm going to do the same thing on both the interfaced collar stand and the facing. So on the upper part of the interfaced collar stand, I'm going to bend it equally this way like this. I'm going to still notch it this way like this. I'm going to do the same thing on this facing for the collar stand. I'm going to bend it this way like this. I'm going to notch the midpoints. This will help us when we're fixing the collar stand to the collar. Now this is the interface part of the collar. If I open it up this way, you see this is the part of the collar that has the interfacing. You're going to make this part face up. So you're going to bend the facing of this collar stand, bend it upside down and place it on top of the collar, matching these notches that we made here. So the facing part of the collar stand that doesn't have the interfacing is going to face the interface part of the collar that has the facing. So the interface part of the collar that has the interfacing, you're going to face it upside down like this. You're going to take the collar and you're going to place it on top. So now basically the part of the collar that doesn't have interfacing will face the part of the collar stand that has the interfacing like this, match the notches. Then this part of the facing is going to be on top of this part of the collar that has interfacing. So I'm going to place it this way, match all the notches together this way, face all the notches together this way, then turn it. So this is the part of the collar stand that has interfacing. Place it under the machine this way, raise your presser foot. Now if you notice that part of the collar where we press, you can see the crease line, the iron line of what we pressed on the collar. You're going to match the collar stand to that line so that you're going to stitch right on top of the line or just after the line. So now you're going to place it under the machine starting from the middle. So you're stitching at the edge of this interface part of the collar stand, stitch it down till you get to this part, then you curve it down to this part. You're stitching the two interface parts and the collar in the middle, you're stitching it together. So I'm going to stitch, follow it through this way like this, align this part, make sure the curves are aligned. Then you're going to stitch it following the curve this way like this, then align these two parts through here like this, following this curve of the collar stand, then you back stitch. So now we've stitched this part, we're going to stitch this other part here. So you're going to turn it this other way like this, place it from that place where we started, stitch it down this way like this. Okay, I'm going to follow the curve like this, curve down this way like this, and back stitch. Then I'm going to turn this part this way like this, turn it to the right side. So I'm going to take my pressing iron and I'm going to press down this part here. So press down this part this way like this. So I'm going to trim off some part of this excess allowance on this collar stand facing here. I'm going to leave just 1/4 inch here. So that's just what I need. And I'm going to trim it off this way like this, just leaving that 1/4 inch allowance at the lower parts. Then I'm going to take the collar and bend it halfway like this. Then on this facing on the collar stand, I'm going to notch to get the midpoint of the facing. So this is the midpoint of the facing. That's on this part here. So this is the part we're going to sew around the neck of the shirt. So now before we fix the collar on the neck of the shirt, I'm going to draw a top stitch on this part of the collar, just a 1/4 inch allowance. Take it down, maintaining that 1/4 inch, take it down like this. I'm still going to turn it this way, then take my stitch down. Yes, when I get to this part, I'm going to back stitch. As you can see, this is what we have here. See the top stitch, as you can see, it's very straight. Okay, so this is what we have here. This is our collar. So you're going to take this right side and open it up to the inside. So now you're going to carry the collar piece this way, face it this way like this. You're going to align the collar stand this way. You're going to run a stitch and sew the collar stand to the neck of the shirt. Place it inside of the machine. Then you start sewing it from here like this down to this point like this. Now ensure that when you're sewing just after this fold. So you're stitching the collar stand to the neck of the shirt just around this spot here where my scissors is. So now you just stitch about 1 inch down, then you back stitch it. We're going to remove it from the machine this way, and we're going to get the other part of the neck of the shirt. We're going to align this part this way too like this. Place it under the machine this way like this. Then I'm going to sew from here like this. Just stitch just 1 inch, then back stitch, then remove this part too from the machine this way like this. We'll stitch down this part down by 1 inch, and we'll also stitch down this part down by 1 inch. So we're going to go back to this initial stitch that we started. Then we're going to sew it, joining the collar to the neckline of the shirt till we get to this point. So now I'm going to place it under the machine, continue the initial stitch that I started. The essence of notching this midpoint is to align the midpoint of the collar to the midpoint of the shirt here, so that you'll be able to check if it is actually aligned when you're sewing the collar to the neck of the shirt. So as you can see, it is aligned here. As you can see, this is the midpoint, this is the two midpoint. As you can see, is aligned. So we can go on with our stitch. Stitch it down. So we're going to close this rough edge that we have here, but we're going to start the stitch from here. Run my edge stitch at the edge here like this, run it down, round the curve like this. You raise your presser foot and push these rough edges in like this. Make sure you lock in all the rough edges. You lock it in, push it inside. Then you're going to run your stitch on top, locking that rough edge inside. So I'm going to cover this part up this way like this till I get to this other part here. Then we'll sew down and connect it to that initial part that we started from, down to this point like this. Then bend it this way and take it to the other side like this. Edge stitch at the top. And when I get to that point, I'm going to back stitch. Our collar is all set. As you can see, our stitches came out very well. The shape of the collar came out very well.